So let's talk for a few minutes about some characteristics of perpetrators of rape. So, what we know about individuals that perpetrate rape, they tend to fall within 4 different categories or 4 different classifications. So, the largest group of individuals that engage in rape or that perpetrate rape are doing it for some sort of reason related to power. So, individuals that we would consider power rapists or that are engaging in rape in order to feel some sense of power over the other person. Typically, these types of rapes are premeditated. So this person is planning these rapes out in advance and thinking through the actual rape event. And it's also typically fantasy driven. So they're having lots of fantasies about rape. And eventually, the more and more that they have these fantasies, the more likely they are to engage in an aggressive act. Typically, power rapists are going to be individuals that rape in order to try to express virility, mastery, or dominance as a means of trying to overcome their own feelings of powerlessness. And they're going to do it in order to resolve some doubts that they might have about their own masculinity or sexual inadequacy. So that's the largest group of individuals that are engaging in rape tactics. The second largest group of rapes occur by individuals that are doing it out of a sense of anger. So these types of rapes tend to be more impulsive and spontaneous, but they often also tend to be more dangerous than the power rapists. So the reason for that has to do with that level of anger that the person is experiencing. So not only are anger rapists likely to engage in sexual penetration, but they're also likely to batter or to injure the victim. So they're likely to beat the person up in addition to raping them. So these types of rapes tend to be more dangerous to the victims because they lead to more injury and more psychological injury over time. Anger rapes tend to be associated with rape as an expression of hostility towards women, with an intent to degrade, hurt, and humiliate the woman and or the victim if it's not a woman. They also tend to have an association between sexual arousal and anger. So what I mean by that is when a person feels angry, they're more likely to be sexually aroused and vice versa. So there's that sort of sexual arousal association with anger. The next group of rape perpetrators is the smallest group that we know of. So only about 5% of rapes would fall into this category. So in this group, again, rapes are carefully planned out, and they tend to induce terror and try to keep the victim off balance. So this category we're going to refer to as sadistic rapists or sadistic rapes. Individuals that fall in this category tend to be serial rapists, so they're going to be people that perpetrate rape multiple times. Again, very planned out and ritualistic. And they tend to choose victims that have specific characteristics that are deemed desirable by the perpetrator. So there's not a large amount of people that would fall into this category in comparison to the other two groups, but this is a specific type of rape that does occur. And then finally, we have gang rapes, which are the fourth category. Now, gang rapes really can fall into any of the 3 preceding categories. So sometimes gang rapes involve power, sometimes they involve anger, and sometimes they're led by a sadistic individual. So this category, we don't have a specific percentage of how many people fall in this category because they can involve components of each of the other 3 categories that we just talked about. But what we do know about gang rapes is typically they occur by males that are either in high school or college aged. They tend to be more aggressive because there is this research finding that in groups, men are more aggressive than when they're by themselves or when they're alone. And so that research finding that groups of men tend to lead to higher rates of aggression is sort of the explanation for why gang rapes might tend to occur. Again, this is another area where more research is definitely needed, but this is what we know so far about gang rapes. So just like with dating violence, we have some possible explanations for why sexual assault might occur. They're going to be really similar to those same sorts of reasons that we talked about with dating violence. So alcohol consumption certainly is a possible explanation for sexual assault. Historical learning factors, so that intergenerational transmission of abuse. Those same sorts of individual traits, hypermasculinity, anger, and aggression. and also that interpersonal control. So all of those same factors that we see with dating violence are also possible explanation factors for sexual assault. Outside of those intrapersonal and interpersonal factors, we also have cultural explanations or possible cultural explanations for sexual assault. So a lot of these cultural factors include the way that we view women in society, so sort of female objectification. And also, they include our ideas about masculinity and femininity. So, if any of you have seen the documentary Tough Guys, so that idea of hypermasculinity and how we socialize men in the United States culture, that's a potential explanation for why sexual assault might occur or might have a higher likelihood of occurring. In the same respect, how women are viewed in society and are often objectified, not only in media, but also in television shows and advertisements. All of these things contribute to how we view women and how women are treated. So now that we've talked about what we know in terms of characteristics of individuals that experience dating violence and sexual assault, characteristics of individuals that perpetrate dating violence and sexual assault, and some possible explanations for why dating violence and sexual assault occur, it seems like we have this unresolved question of why does sexual assault and dating violence continue to occur now that we know that this is a problem? One of the potential reasons why dating violence and sexual assault continue to occur in the United States in particular has to do with a lack of disclosure and help-seeking behaviors that are highly associated with experiencing dating violence and sexual assault. So often the question gets asked, why don't people disclose, or why don't people come forward and report dating violence and sexual assault? Well, there are all kinds of reasons for that. Often the experience of dating violence or sexual assault is associated with feelings of embarrassment, shame, self-blame, feelings of failure. And so when you've experienced dating violence or sexual assault and you're also experiencing one or more of those feelings, it can be really difficult to come forward and report that that experience has happened or to seek help and admit that you've experienced. Additionally, often, particularly with sexual assault, there's a fear of retribution from either the perpetrator or the people that the perpetrator knows, or even your own friends or family. So coming forward and reporting dating violence and sexual assault can be really challenging for one's own personal safety. There's sort of this risk for re-victimization after someone comes forward and reports an instance of dating violence or sexual assault. And so just experiencing the dating violence or sexual assault potentially puts you at risk for experiencing further victimization. There's also the fear of how the criminal justice system and law enforcement are going to respond after it's been reported. So unfortunately, historically, many criminal justice systems and law enforcement agencies throughout the United States have not handled domestic violence and sexual assault cases appropriately or in a very respectful way for the victim. And so often people see this happening and they don't want to come forward because they know potentially how the scenario could play out, both in law enforcement and criminal justice system. So you can see there's all kinds of reasons potentially why individuals don't report, but unfortunately, that lack of disclosure and lack of help-seeking behavior is one of the reasons why this issue continues to be a problem within the United States culture. So hopefully today you've gotten a sense of how we would define dating violence and sexual assault. You've gotten a sense of what are some of the risk factors associated with domestic violence and sexual assault. You've gotten a sense of characteristics of perpetrators of dating violence and sexual assault. And hopefully we've tried to attempt to explain why dating violence and sexual assault occur. But certainly we know that there's all kinds of additional research that needs to be done to help us figure out the sort of leftover questions for these issues. So on that note, please read Chapter 7. And participate in the discussion forums for today. If you've got any questions about any of this material or anything that comes up in the reading, feel free to email me or post a discussion question. If not, then we will continue to talk about this in class.